all of these scriptures go together. And it's all about Jesus' mission and what he came to do. He came for a reason, some very good reasons. Because there was a problem. And Isaiah says the problem in just a couple of little verses, that sum up every problem, everything, and really get this through. Life is not a problem. We are the problem. He says in Isaiah 53, we all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way. We all go on our own path. Even those that were right there with Jesus, still trying to go on their own path. I tried to figure out how to put the dogs into this, because you know how it is in Winston County. We had one that tried to come in, had the door open. Big old hound dog from across the road. It's like, can I come in? I asked him if he wanted to. I said he had to stay outside if he wanted to come to church, but he's like, he's going to come in. Like, no. They just wander around, but they end up finding their way home. But the sheep, people talk about, sheep kind of being kind of dumb. I don't know if we're that dumb, but sometimes we are. But sheep, when they get to grazing, they just don't pay attention to where they are. Dogs pay attention to where they are. Sheep, they don't pay attention. They're just nibbling on the grass, and they just wander away. And it might not necessarily be an intentional going astray, but it's just nibbling on the grass and end up somewhere they didn't intend to be. And that's kind of where humanity has gotten, and James and John certainly have gotten there. Even though they are and have been with Jesus, they still are not really understanding what Jesus is talking about. And he's talking a lot about the kingdom of God, what it is, the nature of it, that it's kind of here, but not yet, but it doesn't work the same way as the rest of the world does. And they kind of think that because they're disciples, and John is kind of in the one, kind of, maybe he thinks he's kind of Jesus' favorite a little bit there, but they know he's already told them a couple of times that his death is coming, and this might be right, I think it was the third time. Jesus tells them, this is what's going to happen. And they think that his kingdom is coming to get control back from the Romans and let God's people be in charge of Israel again, and everything's going to be great. So it's like, hey, do us a favor. Do whatever, that's kind of a trick question. We want you to do whatever we ask. You don't walk up to somebody and do that unless it's your kid, but okay, what do you want? They wanted shotgun. I almost titled this, I call shotgun, but I already printed the bulletin. That's what they're doing. They're calling shotgun. I didn't know where that term came from until we started watching Westerns. I just have to put that in there. He's on the stagecoach. They had the driver. They had somebody sitting next to him with a shotgun that would look out for bandits or, Indians or whatever. That's where that comes from. So they were basically calling shotgun. They wanted to sit in those two choice spots next to Jesus when he came into his kingdom, when he's set up as the ruler of what they didn't understand, and be right there next to him. Be Robin to his Batman, or whatever, to be right there with Jesus. It's like, y'all don't know what you're asking for. You don't understand what it is you're asking for. Because he knew what he was about to endure, and he's told them already. Suffering, and Isaiah talks about it, the unjust trials, the oppression, everything that's going to happen to him, Jesus knows it's coming. And the death, and y'all don't know what you're asking for. But you will experience it, as they do later. But they think that they can. You will, but in a different way. And of course, the other 10 get a little fluffed about it because, they wanted those positions as well. There's always a little bit of rivalry among the 12. You think that they're all holy and perfect and get along great and everything's wonderful. And here's like, it's not always. There's always that little bit of rivalry, that vying for position and favoritism with Jesus. So they get a little ticked off at them for even asking that question. So here is an opportunity to teach them something and to teach us something that we often forget, because I see it out in the world. You pay attention to any of these entertainers, football players, politicians, whatever, the elite people. Churches, they have it too. We're not immune to it. People, the elites, the popular. I actually kind of go back to high school. It's like, have we never grown up? That we still act like we're in high school, that we have the popular group, and then the not so popular kids that are trying to be part of the popular group, and then you got, all the other groups, people after that. We still have that out in the world. But Jesus says, those who are regarded as rulers over the Gentiles, the elite people, those that are up there, they lord it over them. There was this big dinner in New York with all these people that were there, for Catholic Charities over the weekend, and there was all the elites were there. Well, there you go. Would we have been invited? No. Would anybody off the street have been invited? No, because they couldn't afford to go. They didn't have the white tie and the suit and everything. It's just for the elite people. And they lord it over, and then they hold it over. And that's what we do. We all go our own way, and we think we've got to be in that group. We've got to attach ourselves somehow. People will do that. You'll see, little groupies and the bodyguards and all that, trying to get in with these people so that they can, I don't know, if they need some sense of worth or something, that they're not as important if they're not with those people. But then you get those elite that kind of, well, we're better than you. We've got more than you. And we get to do things that you don't get to do, and we get to have the private jets, and we get to have the houses and the security and all this stuff, and you don't get to have it. And Jesus said, that's the world. That's how it works. That's just how it works. But in the kingdom of God, that's not how it works. It's different. It's opposite. No, if you want to be great, because that's what we want to feel better about ourselves and be great. If you want to be great, you're not going to do that. You're not going to try to attach yourself to the elite group of people, and you're not going to be in that class and those rulers and snub your nose at everybody else that's beneath you. No, you're going to be down there, and I've said this before, down in the dirt. You're going to go get down in the dirt. You're going to be the servant for all. You must be the servant if you want to be great. You must be the slave to all. And he says, even I, the Son of Man, that's what he called himself, I didn't come to be served. I didn't come to be in that elite, and his birth and everything about his life proved it. Because of who he was born to, where he was born, how he grew up. Nobody knew anything about him until he showed up at John's baptism. Nobody, there was nothing that would attract anybody to him. Nothing. Average looking, average height, average. Nothing special. Proving he didn't come to be served by anybody. Everything he did, he tells somebody that wants to follow him, I'm going to come follow you. It's like, I don't even have a home. I don't have a home. Are you sure you want to do this? He had a home base, but he didn't have his own home, his own place that he called his. Because he was not there to be served. He did not come for that. And this was his mission. This is the grand vision of what he did. And the purpose was to give himself and to give his life to set everybody else free. Everybody. There was a problem. We all, like sheep, have gone astray, just nibbled our way away from God. And he laid on him the guilt of us all. That suffering servant is speaking of the Messiah, and the Messiah is Jesus. He took the hit for us. To make restitution, to set it right, to acquit the rebels. Which without, you see this everywhere. As God gets taken more and more out of society, more and more out of the home, more and more outside of us, even in the church. But he's just out there. We talk about him. And we don't unite with him. We don't experience him and know him. We stay rebels. But he came to acquit those rebels and bring us back to, and then he shares, Isaiah says that not only does he do that, but he also shares the victory. He divides the spoils and shares the peace with the strong. Because, as Hebrews says, he became the source of salvation. He became the source of bringing us back into the sheepfold, bringing us back into the pen, taking all of that guilt upon himself. He is not one of the elite. He never will be one of the elite. But he proved his service not, I was thinking at first that he was serving us. But he wasn't. He was serving God, the Father. His obedience to the Father is what led him to service, to his humble submission. Hebrews says it. He heard his prayers and cries were heard because of his reverent submission. The son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered. And once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him. He gets down in the dirt. I've heard a clip, pulled it up and watched it again. I don't know how I came across it, but the testimony of Justin Bieber, and he was in it with the elite. Bad stuff. But listening to him in an interview with, I don't know who the guy was, talking about his change. He was talking about Jesus, and I was really listening to him, because sometimes people can, do these little testimonies and stuff, and I can go like, yeah, you're just spouting words, just by what they say. And it kind of makes me wonder, but the way he was saying it was like, nah, this kid has found Christ and has been changed. Because he's the one, this is not a new phrase to me, but he talks about how Jesus got down in the dirt with him. That he was down as low as he could go, and Jesus went down in the dirt with him and found him there. He didn't have to get cleaned up and get everything together before he could have a relationship with Christ. Christ came down in the dirt and pulled him out of the dirt. And he does that because he's serving God through serving us. He's not just about us. His ultimate mission is to be obedient and to serve Father. But he did that by becoming one of us and serving us. And he does that through the suffering servant in Isaiah 53 by taking on the effects of our sin, like I said, in that rebellion, through what he suffered and how he's unjustly taken away in silent submission, though he did no wrong. He was completely innocent to acquit and share the victory. He bore the punishment in that sin for us. So any sins that we have, that we know, that we do, we don't have to suffer the shame for that. Only up until we get to that point where we admit and say, yes, I did it, and he gets down there in the dirt and says, no, it's forgiven, let's move on. It's done and over with. But no, we want to hold on to it. Stop holding on to it. and let it go. It all got laid on him. He bore the iniquity. He bore the guilt, so we don't have to carry it. But he also served God as the high priest in Hebrews, chosen and appointed by God again to suffer on our behalf. Do we still suffer? Yes, we do, but not the way he did. Because we suffer because we did wrong. He suffered, he didn't do any wrong. But he submitted to the Father. This is his mission. This is what he came to do. And he offered himself willingly. I mean, that's something that we really need to remember, is he did this willingly, voluntarily. Who would do that? Nobody would do that even for a good person. I think Paul says in Romans, who would do that? Willingly go to die for somebody. It really, almost nobody would do that. But he did. So he could become the source of our salvation. And as one of us, and in submission to the Father, he came as a human to identify with us, to know all the temptations that we have, to know what it is to be human. Not as elite, but humble. To serve and to submit even to the point of death. Willingly again. And he gave us the example of his life and his teachings. Gave his life as a sacrifice. So what? So what? This is our call to apprenticeship. If you weren't here last week, I brought this word up last week, apprentice. We are called, if we're going to be a follower of Christ, or we're going to believe, if we're going to accept that ransom, that setting free from sin, if we're going to accept it, we also need to accept his example of humble service. The attitude and the character and the will of God, and take his way upon us. Because we're called to be with Jesus, to be like Jesus, and to do what Jesus did. And what did Jesus do? He humbled himself to God. He humbled himself in service to God by serving others. And he loved people. And it's a lifelong process. Slowly over time, as the psalmist said, as we dwell in the Most High. It's not just once in a while here, once in a while here. If you did that with eating, you would wither up and die. I think it's Easter. I think I'll eat today. It's been a couple months. I think I'll eat today. No, you gotta keep it going. Otherwise, you don't thrive as a human being. It's the same way. So I wonder, why do we get up here and do this every single week? It's like eating a meal. You've got to do it. Because if you don't, you'll be like one of those sheep, and you'll just nibble onto something else. You'll nibble your way off the path away from God. Because that's a continual thing. That's the problem that he came to solve, but it is also a continual thing that we have to work on to make sure we don't wander off. It's a process of being slowly over time becoming more and more like Jesus, with focused attention on God, so that we can become like him, because that's the point, is to become like him. If we're going to be disciples and to be apprenticed to him, to be with him, to know what he did and to do what he did, and to serve. And it's not easy. Never want to give that impression that it's ever easy. But it is God's work in us. We just set ourselves in the place where he can do that work and open ourselves up to that. And oftentimes it does come through our pain and suffering. C.S. Lewis says often that pain is God's megaphone to the world. It's like getting our attention. I'm here. Let me in. It's not easy. But serving people that you don't know, that's easy. Because they don't know you. And you don't know them. In, out. Serve, love it, go home, you're done. It's hard. And where the primary place of ministry is. is with those people that know us the best. In the house, in the family, with our friends, whatever. That's the hard place. That's the hardest place to be a humble, Christ-like servant, is with the people that know you the best. And that you know the best. Because we know each other's buttons and irritations and stuff, and it's easier to be a little bit more selfish. But if we're going to do what Jesus did, everything else is easy. Serving people outside is easy. So when we do it in the house, in those relationships, that it's more sacrificial, which is what Jesus' service was as well, because he sacrificed himself even to death. But he did it from love. That's love. That's love. This is what we don't get. That's love. A sacrificial, self-giving is love. And if we're going to receive it from him, we darn well better be giving it, especially to those closest to us. Thanks be to God for that love.